during the past few months, as an Israeli looking outward, we've seen. I was thinking, talking. I was going to talk with you about what we've seen just in the past month or so. The Eurovision contest has decided that next week they'll say if they're going to allow Israel to be in the contest or throw us out. UEFA of the European Soccer Football League is going to do the same. They're going to vote whether to kick us out of the football league. So Maccabi Tel Aviv and Hapoel Haifa will be kicked out if they decide the Israeli soccer teams will be kicked out. The Spanish prime minister insinuated that he would like to throw a atomic bomb at Israel to stop the atrocities in Gaza. And obviously, there's a lot more, but obviously, the whole Palestinian recognition at the UN, where you just were stuck in traffic. So, I guess my question to you is, why do they hate us so much? What is this fixation with Israel? I know this is one of the main themes of your book, so maybe just water it down for us. I know you can't go through the whole book now.
There are, I think, two particular things going on. One is something that Secretary of State Marco Rubio actually referred to this past week, when he said accurately that the countries like my own country of birth, Great Britain, France, Canada, Australia, that their otherwise meaningless, certainly futile announcement that they were going to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state is really a reflection not of their abilities on the international stage or their ability to affect anything in the Middle East. After all, the era in which countries like Britain and France could create states is, I think, well regarded and known to be over. What Secretary of State Rubio said was that this comes from the fact that these countries have all taken in very large immigrant populations in recent years. Very considerable amounts of them are from the Muslim world, and they've brought their domestic bigotries with them, including the anti-Semitic bigotries, which even mainstream Muslims will admit is a preoccupation of their communities, very sadly. And Marco Rubio's observation was that these arrivals have come either themselves or their parents, and they have brought their obsession with the Jews and the Jewish state with them, and that to that extent, people like Mark Carney, Keir Starmer, and others are simply reacting to a domestic audience that is virulently anti-Semitic in very large parts and obsessed with Israel. And I think that's a very important factor in it. I think there's one other factor, though, which perhaps gets less attention, although, as you know, I address it in the book as well, which is what I regard as and described as the religion of Palestinianism. That is, people who've been ill-educated, badly educated into the belief that you might sum it up in a slogan like, no one is free until Palestine is free. As if, I don't know, to put it at its most ludicrous, but it does come up like this, a trans person in New York cannot be free until the Palestinians have a state. I see, by the way, along these lines, rather, you've got to take your laughs where you can these days, that the Greta Thunberg flotilla has had a fallout because there aren't enough LGBTQIA plus people on the flotilla. Personally, I would love the flotilla to be filled with LGBTQIA Palestinian activists, and I'd like to see them land in Gaza and be welcomed in traditional fashion by the locals. But this erroneous belief that that Palestinians and the right of Palestinians to a state is the pressing international and indeed domestic concern really can be summed up by nothing else than that it is a kind of religion. Nobody is from one week to the next marching through New York or London or Toronto or Sydney demanding that the Kurdish people have a state, although the Kurdish people have much more of a right to a state, as far as I can see, and a much better justification for a state than the Palestinians. Because the Palestinians, of course, have been offered a state repeatedly and repeatedly rejected it, whereas the Kurds have done an enormous amount of good, an enormous amount of fighting on the side of the West, of course, not least against ISIS. But But nobody says that. Like, nobody says nobody is free until northern Cyprus is free from the Turkish occupation. These things don't appear from not just one year to the next, but one decade to the next as major international themes. But there has been an indoctrination and a miseducation of, I think, an entire generation, really, that believes that, yes, that Palestinianism is the key issue. And that's why they, go to university and instead of studying, will live in a tent and holler about the Jewish state. And they find meaning in their lives like this, it seems. They've trodden it. This is where the religion of the West, that was the traditional religion of the West, has largely evaporated from the public space. Yeah. We all knew there were going to be consequences from that. But one is you get new religions, and this is a new religion. And, it's even got its own holy garb, the wearing of the kafir, and, the proper pronunciation of Palestine, and all these things.
Can I just, one thing, just because up until October 7th, or maybe behind the scenes, it was also there, obviously, but there was another important cause. Every time there was another important cause for the same type of people. So until October 7th, as someone whose family still lives in New York, where I think you are now, we saw the BLM stuff. So you had to have the black box on your Instagram, and you had to, and before that, there was the trans flag that whoever didn't have it wasn't part of the in religion.
And whenever there's not a very, very proximate one, the climate emergency can always come in as the latest, religion.
It's just a religion, you think, or is there something? What is, like, one of the things when Ayan Hirsi Ali was on our show, and I know you really appreciate her and you speak about her a lot, was she said to me that this alliance between the Green-Red Alliance, she calls it, she said the Greens know what will be once they tear down Western civilization. They know they have the Islamic Caliphate, they're going to kill all the non-believers, everyone's going to be under Sharia law. The red people have literally no idea what will be, these people on college campuses, what will be. The only thing for sure is that they'll be eaten by the green ones. How do you, is it just stupidity? You spoke about also the madness of crowds, I think, about this type of madness of tons of people thinking the same stupid ideas.
Yeah, well, it's, there have been lots of iterations of this, I think, of the post 9/11 period, where actually I wrote some of my first pieces as a journalist about the curious coalition of the, vegans for peace walking alongside the halal meat eaters, and, queers for justice marching alongside people who would throw them off buildings. So that's not a new thing. Right. That's been around for some decades, actually, now. Usually the expectation is that it falls apart under the weight of its own contradictions. But as I pointed out in Madness of Crowds, an important thing to get from the sort of the red bit of it is that the Marxists and the post-Marxists and the people who don't realize they're Marxists don't mind contradictions in the way that you and I might mind them. So you and I might mind that this seems to be unsolvable as an alliance, but Marxists very often see insoluble things as simply another thing to solve, and contradiction is not a problem. Yes. But I do think that most of these groupings, I always say that the anti-Israelism is the first bit of it, but it really always boils down to the same thing, which is the hatred of the West in general. And you see that just the other week here in America, there was a conference of Palestinian activists, and one of them said on stage, one of our key things is we have to destroy the idea of America. We have to destroy the idea that America is good. That is literally what they believe. They believe that Israel is a colonialist, settler, white supremacist, genocidal, ethno-state, Nazi, blah, blah, blah. But they believe the same thing about Canada, Britain, France, Australia, America. They believe it about all of these things as well. And I have this shorthand for this that I've tried to popularize in recent years, which is find me a pro-Israel demonstration in the West, outside of Israel, and people will be flying the Israeli flag and the flags of the country they're in. and they will usually sing Hatikva at the end and also the national anthem of the country they're in. Find me one Palestinianist protest in the West where they fly, yes, of course, they fly the flags of the Palestinians, they fly Hezbollah, Hamas flags, and so on, flags of the Iranian Revolutionary Government, but they will never fly the flag of the country they're in. And this tells us everything, absolutely everything. There has not been a Palestinianist protest in London that has finished with the singing of God Save the King. Whereas the pro-Israel ones always finish with the national anthem and Hatikva. Why would the Palestinianist ones not finish with the singing of God Save the King? Because they don't want God to save the King, and they don't like the United Kingdom. In Washington, D.C., if you have an anti-Israel demonstration, the only American flags around will be the ones that they've torn down from flagpoles to burn on the street. So this is the very big tell that anyone with eyes should not just notice, but learn from.
Right. So, and that it seems so obvious what you're saying, and yet we see, for example, in the UK and Canada and France, all these leaders who see this, and either they're very cowardly, so they want to win the next immediate election, and they're willing to jeopardize the entire future, or they're stupid. There's really no other way to read this, where they're just giving into the mob, when the mob is just, the appetite is going to grow with other things that might not have to do with Israel, right?
Well, yes. I mean, I'll give you an example. In February 2024, January or February 2024, the workings of the British Parliament were disrupted and altered because there was a large Palestinianist protest happening outside that became very intimidating against members of Parliament. And so parliamentary procedure changed. The then Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said in a subsequent set of remarks, rather strange but emergency remarks on the steps of Downing Street, that it was coming to seem like the rule of democracy was going to be replaced by the rule of the mob. He said that, and absolutely nothing happened as a consequence. But anyone with eyes and a voice that's courageous should be able to notice that and comment on it. But a lot of them don't. A lot of the members of Parliament and others don't. I suspect that Keir Starmer and Mark Carney and others think they've bought themselves some time, and they may have done. I mean, all of these parties of the left that have announced Palestinian statehood are all parties that have a wing of their party or a break-off wing which threatens them electorally. For instance, in Britain, it's the so-called Gaza independents who were elected to Parliament in the election last year. Just imagine for a moment, by the way, how bizarre it is, and what a terrible indictment of the sectarian politicking that now goes on in Great Britain, that people will be standing for Parliament and win a seat as Gaza independents. Like, what the hell has it got to do with them? What's it got to do with someone in the middle of England? Absolutely nothing. So these people presumably think that electorally they've done something clever, or at least have bought themselves some time. The real reason why they don't address it is, going back to the Marco Rubio point, is that if they were to address it, it would be very difficult and very divisive and maybe dangerous. You would have to, for instance, do what the Trump administration is doing in the US and forcibly deport foreign criminals and agitators who shouldn't be in your country. But I don't see any likelihood at the moment that the Starmer administration is going to do that in the UK or any of their counterparts. And so the problem will just grow. And they know that that's a problem, but they put it off for their successors, at which point the problem is worse.